Hi, everybody. Tim Hagen from Progress Coaching, and we are going to discuss today self awareness. Now, one of my favorite thought leaders in this area is a young lady by the name of Tasha Eurich. Great book called Insights, talking about some of her work as it relates to self awareness. I've listened to her book now twice driving to my cabin on Audible, and I love it. And it's very research oriented, but very driven with real world examples. It's really well done. And I love one of her studies, and I think I've got the numbers right. Uh, 95% of the people in her survey said they were highly self aware. And then she found out through testing them about 10, maybe 15% of people were somewhat aware, which means about 80 to 85% of us are just full of it. And ironically, one of the things that I've actually done for a long time is I've always defined coaching as a two-step process. Number one, it's people looking in the mirror. Number two, it's people taking action on number one. But very few people do number one arbitrarily on their own. Never knew it was called self awareness 27 years ago, but I've always preached that. So as we go through this session, I want you to share different things in the comments, reach out to us. Um, again, we want to do this very 100% educationally fun. Ask any questions you may have in the chat. We'll get back to you. And then certainly, what's your biggest concern with employee self-awareness? So I want to start off with a really funny story. I was talking to a leader at one of our client sites in the East Coast, financial services firm. And she said, Tim, you don't understand. Our people are fatigued. And I think I shared this at our last live session. Our people are just fatigued. And I said, okay, well, let's, what are you guys in right now? And she said, well, we're in a hybrid world. And so what we did is we started to reverse engineer the time away from the office that converted into time savings. And so we started to talk, and started asking her questions such as, well, 3 days a week, what does that save somebody? And she goes, oh, about an hour and a half of driving with traffic, getting out of your car, walking to your office. I said, okay, let's call it 4.5 hours. I said, how often do you think there's idle chit chat every single day in the office? Just 20 minutes of just, geez, I wish that conversation didn't go that long. She said, oh, probably 20 minutes a day. I'm like, all right, we're at an hour a week. So we're at about 5.5 hours. And we came up with a couple other things. It came out to about 6, 7 hours. Let's just call it six. And I said, do you mind if I ask you kind of a weird question? And she said, sure. I said, why do people not work out? And she stopped and she goes, what? And I go, why do people not work out? She said, well, they don't have time. I said, well, let me stop you. Didn't we just discover 24 hours of time that could be reinvested in potentially working out that would re energize and help offset fatigue? And she said, oh my gosh, you're right. This isn't brilliant, but it shows we lack self awareness. And she said, I've never thought of it that way. And I said, I'm not saying that people should take 24 hours and reinvest it all into, fitness workouts or anything like that. I think it's one of those things that we have to be very conscientious of being aware that we're in a mode of not always looking in the mirror. And I love to say this all the time as a little bit of a humorous context. People need to purchase a mirror. Then they need to look at the mirror. Then they've got to like what they see, even when it doesn't always show a beautiful face and maybe some things we don't like about ourselves. Then and only then can we take action. Let me give you an example. In these present tough times, we hear things like lack of career. We hear, um, you know, lack of career. We hear things like motivation, lack of energy, lack of teamwork, fatigue. I said, we can't look at every one of those issues and say, John, you got to get motivated. Susie, you're lacking fatigue. Re energize. Now, Bill, you're not a great teammate, pal. Doesn't work that way. I often share this, and I have a great author, one of the better authors and friends of mine, Thane Balama, wrote a great book on teamwork. You should check it out on ATD. And he talks about giving people the value of work. And I love his insight on this. And I think about also with self awareness. If we don't work on ourselves, if we don't think about ourselves, and we don't invest in ourselves and look in the mirror and improve ourselves, what's going to happen is we're not going to be able to contribute to the team. See, what happens a lot in the team is if we don't look in the mirror first, we can't contribute to the team. What we typically do is this: we point. It's not me, it's that guy or it's that lady over there. And what we do is we're really saying, don't look at me. And I did this at a keynote at a company recently, and I demonstrated that. I said, change starts with each and every one of you. And if you use the words, yeah, but, you're never going to change because you've dismissed yourself from the responsibility of looking in the mirror where change can really start. The only way a team can operate efficiently, fluently, cooperatively together is if each one of us make a commitment. If 3 out of 6 people make a commitment to the team and 3 out of 6 people say, it's not me, it's them, you're going to have what I call fractional success. Where you have fractional participation, you have fractional success. So think about, and I'm not a rower, but I always loved watching rowing. My wife, who I dated in college, she lived in a dormitory and it was right across the lake in Madison, Wisconsin, and we would see rowers. And I always found that fascinating because you never saw them out of sequence. Not once did you ever hear a rower. Not once in the Olympics did you ever hear a rower say, I can't believe we got the silver medal. It wasn't me, it was the 2 guys in the front because they're 100% synchronized. Each one of them had to come with that commitment of looking in the mirror and saying, what can I do to become the best rower so the team can become the best rowing team? Little corny, little cliche. So, how do we build self awareness? First, I want to teach you something in terms of some questions that we teach in our system. First of all, what questions? Framed out into something we call self actualized questions. So, John, what are you going to do to successfully engage with your teammates? What are you going to do to successfully re energize Susie? What are you going to do to successfully raise your level of motivation? Tim, what are you going to do to successfully find out what motivates you? It's a what question framed with a success. So often we teach it in our course using children. When we tell our kids, little Johnny, little Susie, you got to study for next Tuesday test. Do they ever look at us really happily and say, "Hey, thanks a lot. I didn't think of that." No, they roll their eyes and they walk out of the room. But if you ask the question, what are you going to do to successfully prepare for your test and what could I do to assist you? It creates a different reaction. So our approach creates a different reaction. At the foundation of every talent development, coaching, mentoring, training comes down to self awareness. Let me give you another example. Salespeople for years. I got out of sales training 23 years ago and have never looked back. I hate sales training. I know there's great sales trainers out there. I just didn't like it. And here's why. I always got 2 responses every time I did sales training. Well, this is good stuff, but I kind of know what I'm doing. I've been doing this a while. The sales ego got in the way. Number 2, they always brought up, that's good, but our industry's pretty different. And so by saying those things, they always push things away. So I challenge somebody, and I think this goes to the forefront of sales awareness. So we got that response at one of our client sites. We had about 20 people in the room. I think it was all men. I think one of the worst demographics is male salespeople, 40 to 55. And I was in this session, and I'll never forget it. I sat there and I said, you know, how many of you are below average salespeople? Nobody raised their hand. I said, okay. So I'm writing it down. I have my pen and I said, nobody. And I said, do you know every year studies prove out, and this has been true for about 3 decades, that salespeople hit their quota about 48 to 52% of the time. So 1 out of every 2 sales reps either hits their numbers or doesn't. I just asked all of you who here are below average salespeople. Nobody raised their hand. So I turned and I said, "You guys ready?" Nobody's saying a word. I'm kind of I'm kind of calling them out, right? And I looked at the director and I said, "How many people hit their numbers last year?" And there's always one. So remember I said that. There's always one. And the director said, Tim, about 53% of our reps hit their numbers last year. I said, okay, so the numbers kind of bear out. He said, oh, yeah, absolutely. Guy, and there's always one. The guy goes, you don't understand. The economy stunk last year. I said, awesome. I love that you just shared that. He didn't expect that. I said, so let me understand something. I want to make sure I embrace this. I'm going to challenge you. Are you okay with that? And I get this. Yeah, go ahead, challenge me. I said, so do you only sell during good economies? Well, the whole room starts laughing. I said, now I'm challenging you. You put me on the spot. Let me know if this is okay. And he said, yeah, but it was a really tough year. And I said, okay, if things turn around because the economy goes up, do you take credit or do you honestly say, it wasn't me, it was the economy? The director sat there and broke out laughing. He said, I've never heard of that. I said, look, guys, we can be honest with ourselves or not. I've witnessed some of you selling. Do you know how many of you use the following question? Are you happy with your current provider? Yep. Would you be open to having someone on deck? But all of you laughed when we went through open ended question training or needs based selling. So, what was at the forefront of that issue? Their self awareness. I'm a sales rep. I'm good at what I do. I've been doing this a while. We self appoint ourselves because our egos get in the way. Now, we want salespeople with good egos because there's a lot of rejection, but that can manifest itself into a lack of self awareness, which cuts themselves off from professional and thoughtful personal talent development. I'll give you another example. Have you ever called somebody into your office and said, Bob, your attitude's really starting to erode. It's just not very friendly, and I'm getting really frustrated. Have you ever had an employee say, wow, you know what? It has really become pretty bad lately. And, I just want to let you know, I kind of talk bad about my teammates and I undermined them. And yeah, now I did something else that was very edgy. I did a keynote and I often describe workplace cultures using analogies. And I said to this company, I said, there's three types of people. There's three types of people in a company. Now, this doesn't mean it's true. It's just an analogy. And I said, there's players. There's players on the field. They're running the plays. Now, I love to use my volleyball analogies. And I love volleyball because volleyball has a very unique attribute. The players always come together. You don't always see it in football. You don't always see it in basketball. You don't always see it in baseball. But volleyball players always come together. They high five, they smile, even if they've lost the point. Every play. Watch a match sometime. Watch a college match. Every play they come together. It's very unique. Number two, so we have players in the field that run in their plays. Then in the stands, we have what are called bleacher people. Bleacher people sit in the bleachers and they complain about the players. That's dumb. I would never do that. He's not as good as he thinks. And they all have water coolers next to him and they're negative. Now, between the bleacher people and the players, we have what are called fencers. Fencers are people straddling the fence. They're looking over their shoulders saying, you know what? Those bleacher people just sit there. That looks like a lot less work. And oh, by the way, the bleacher people recruit the fencer people because they're straddling. See, the problem is the players do a little recruiting because their heads are down running their plays. That becomes our workplace culture. And so at the forefront of that is self-awareness. Let me give you an example. Once I described that to this keynote, and I had permission to do this, I'm in front of about 250 people. And I said, a lot of what we have to do, everybody, is to become very self aware. And we started with some emotional intelligence assessments. We're certified with EQI and MHS out of Canada. And I said, it starts with us. So I'm going to do an experiment right now. I said, how many of you, by a show of hands, know people that, and I'm showing the screen, the PowerPoint. I said, somebody who's a player, someone always running the plays. Raise your hand. Everybody raises their hands. Said, how many of you know people in the bleachers? Honestly, everybody's hands went up. Said, how many of you know of some people that kind of straddle that negativity and that positivity? Everybody's hands go up. I said, how many of you are bleacher people? Nobody's hands went up. The whole audience broke out laughing. And I said, that's where we need to start, everybody. And everybody lost it. And the president came to me and said, that was awesome. And I said, it's tough because change does not start with the team. Change starts with the individual looking in the mirror, saying, here's what I like, Here's where I have opportunities to raise my game. That's the mirror. I'm holding up two mirrors. Here are the things I do well. Here are the things where I have an opportunity to raise my game. Then and only then can they take action on what they see. If they don't look, they'll never improve. At the foundation of self awareness that counters self awareness is self regulation. Now, I'll test you. How many people do you have in your life that when you offer a suggestion or advice or mentoring or a thought, and they say, yeah, but before you even get done with your first sentence, they already know you're wrong? I call that yeah, but Bob. Yeah, but Bob is very skilled in dismissing, deflecting, and oh my gosh, yeah, but Bob hasn't owned a mirror in 36 years. So self awareness is tough. Let me be a little bit vulnerable. So when I got assessed, I worked with a gentleman out of Dallas, Ed Hennessy. One of the best experiences I've had. Ironically, we're having a virtual beer this Thursday night as I'm developing this session. And one of my scores, he said, "What do you think one of your low scores was?" And I said, "Empathy." And he said, "Well, your second lowest score was impulse control. Where do you think that comes from?" And I said, "Well, I'm a pretty hyper energetic guy, and I have some form of some form of ADD, and it's just it is who I am." And he said, "Yeah." And about the last 4 or 5 years, I worked really hard on empathy, being more thoughtful of other people's feelings. Before, I just didn't care. I just get new people and running a small company where it's tough at times, and you got to produce or you stick out like a sore thumb. I often share this with people. When you join a small company, here's the good news: you will stand out. Here's the bad news: you will stand out. And so when you're in a small company, sometimes there's not a lot of time to nurture and develop talent as much as you'd like, because we need to produce. Whether fair or unfair, that's a gross generalization. And by becoming more empathetic and thoughtful and considerate of other people, I have found myself communications better, relationships are better, interactions are better. And I'm like, wow, how long was I cutting myself off from people? So, what we have to do more than anything is to look in the mirror. And you have people who I promise you don't even own mirrors. We have to help people look in the mirror. The way we help people look in the mirror is by asking questions. Now, I'm going to give you one of the best questions you can ask somebody. And I want to give you a 3-step process. First, I love to share this. Share a thought with somebody. So when you share a thought, such as Jill, I want to share a thought with you. See, share a thought is very friendly, it's very neutral versus saying, Jill, I'm really getting frustrated by your lack of teamwork. Now, if I use the first technique, share a thought, I might say, Jill, I want to share a thought and I'm sharing it with other people as well. She doesn't feel singled out. I want to share a thought, Jill, and I want to share with you. I think we have an opportunity to insert yourself as an energetic, random act of kindness driven, going above and beyond the call of duty employee, where I think you're going to be personally happy. I think the team will tighten. Hearing that, what do you think you're going to do to successfully embrace that thought? Now, Jill, I don't want you to answer. Let's get back together tomorrow. I want to give you some time to think about it. Here's the great thing about self awareness: most people don't look in the mirror because they put their hand up, they stiff arm you. Get away from me. You give someone some time and you start to think. Have you ever had an argument with someone where you found out, 2, 3 hours later, you go, yeah, I probably shouldn't have said that. That was a little out of line. But when you're in the moment, it's heated, right? The same principle applies to self awareness. We don't arbitrarily look in the mirror very well. So, what you can do is share a thought, use a self actualized question such as, what are you going to do to successfully embrace that thought? Make sure you frame out the thought positively, and then give them time to reflect. Time is a wonderful partner to coaching and self awareness. See, often, and I did this with my coach, um, Ed Hennessy, and I did it with a coach that I had, Scott Rasmussen. And Scott and I would talk, and he goes, "Man, you're just hyper. You're just go, 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 go." And I said, "Yeah, why? That's hard work. I'm working. I'm getting a lot done." How immature of a thought process I possessed. And now every week I do two-hour intermittent reflection breaks. For me, it calms me down, which I need a lot of. It gives me time to think and brainstorm. I am always journaling. I have journals for all different purposes. And by writing, it absolves me. It helps me reduce stress. Great book at Harvard, The Progress Principle by Teresa Amable, talks about journaling reduces stress by up to 23%. The other thing that she says is 76% of the time people are at their most motivated state when they're progressing. So I'm constantly journaling things that I'm learning, I'm applying, I'm doing better. Okay. So when we get to reflection, time is a wonderful thing. So when I think about people who say they're fatigued and they're in this hybrid world and they're zoomed out, they've also gained a lot of time they could reinvest into re-energizing, but they don't, because sometimes we wallow, we get so in touch with our hardships and our challenges. I'm not saying they're not real, because they are. Yet when I ask that question, well, how have you reinvested that time savings of not driving into the office? I've had people look at me like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, you just told me it saves you about an hour a day and you're in a hybrid world 3 days a week." I said, geez, that's 12 hours a month. How are you reinvesting that time? I've never had anyone answer that question correctly, because they're lacking self awareness. So, self awareness is really a stiff arm for people. What we need to do is get people to lower their arms. That's why you lead with thoughts. That's why you invest in people's strengths, gain momentum, call people into the office and say, "John, I want to tell you your last 3 reports have been fantastic. And I wanted my boss, Lisa, to be in this session with us so she could hear it from me as well. You are really doing some neat work in this area." Doesn't absolve him of being a better employee. Yet, by acknowledging strengths, and I love Gallup organization has a great study that says when you lead with strength-based feedback, people will engage 8 times more. When we then start to address areas of improvement, don't use the word constructive, don't use the word feedback, use the word opportunity. Use phrases such as raise your game. Then they become more receptive because you've built momentum in the relationship. By doing that, guess what happens? Self-awareness starts to skyrocket. So, I'm going to end there. I hope this was worth your time. This is one of my great passions. Get Tasha Urich's book. It's fantastic. It's a long read. It's a big read, but her insight in some of the stories, and she has a great one, I think, in the beginning about an executive she was coaching, and she was very candid with the person. And it's one of the great stories. So here's the tough thing about self-awareness. We have to help people, but we have to be honest. And if we're not honest, they will falsely convince themselves everything's okay. So I always love to share this. I live by a rule. If you're honest with people, you never have to remember what you tell people. And by doing that, you're going to be in a better position to raise someone's self awareness. Once that awareness goes up, the doors of resistance lower. Guess what happens? They become an open door to approach and coach. Good luck, everybody. Hope this is helpful.